Get higher, baby. Get higher, baby. Get higher, girl. Hey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Knights of the Pages Library. We are a little podcast dedicated to reviewing audiobooks. I am Bo Knight, and with me, as always, is Ryan Knight. And today we're doing something slightly different. We're crossing swords again, so we're taking a look at two separate audiobooks. And yeah, we're gonna review two in one episode. It's a double whammy. I did iRobot, written by oh man, written by Isaac Asimov and narrated by Scott Brick. And what did you do, Ryan?
I did The Old Gods Waken by Manly Wade Welman and narrated by Stefan Rudnicki.
Yeah.
I didn't even know this was actually part of a series until just now. Apparently, it's book one.
Well, yeah, I'm interested to hear more about that, I guess.
Yeah, so what we'll do here, for anybody who hasn't listened to one of our previous, how many of these have we done? Two, three?
This will be our third one.
This will be the third one. Okay. Yeah, so we both listened to a different book this time, and we're basically going to kind of review them to each other. So you kind of get two for the price of one here. If you love that idea, if you hate that idea, or if you have anything you want to say about the books we did, or just anything in general, please feel free to email us. kotpl.pod@gmail.com is by far the easiest way to get a hold of us.
Yeah, we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, why don't you go ahead and tell me some info about your book first there, Bo, when it was written, published, all that, all the basic stuff.
So I am a dumb, and I was going into this listening. I was like, oh man, I can't wait to listen to like Will Smith hanging out with that robot. Yeah, that's not at all what this is. You apparently knew that.
I did know that.
Had no idea, but that's okay. So iRobot by Isaac Asimov was written originally in December 2nd, 1950. It's a collection of a bunch of short stories that he wrote about robots, but they all kind of link together. The first one called Robbie was written in 1940, and then the last one came out in 1950 when he like assembled them all into one book.
Dang. That's just crazy to me though that it's about like robots that long ago.
And dude, it's so eerie. We'll get into it more, but
I'm excited.
It's so on point. It's insane. Yeah, and I think this audiobook that I listened to came out in 2004 when Random House Audio did I think they updated a version of it.
Oh, sure.
So yeah, so what about your book?
So The Old Gods Waken, like I said, by Manly Wade Welman, was originally written actually in 1979.
Oh.
And then the audiobook that I listened to was picked up by Skyboat Media, it looks like, and published in 2014. So
this was unintentionally like a throwback.
Yeah, actually, yeah, it was completely unintentional. So
interesting.
My book, I think, is considerably shorter than yours. Mine's only 5.5 hours.
Yeah, mine was 9 hours. I mean, 8 hours and 20 minutes.
Right. Yes, yours is almost 3 hours longer than mine. Which is okay. I mean, we're just kind of talking about the differences here. So let's get into the important part. So what did you think? Did Scott Brick make or break your book?
I think he's great. I don't know. It has kind of like an old sounding quality to the whole thing, but I don't know. It's kind of comforting to listen to. I don't know. It goes down real smooth.
Nice. Well, that's good. So mine, Stefan Rudnicki, the guy who narrated this one, I thought he was okay. He has like a super deep, gravelly voice. Okay. Which sometimes is good, but for this, I don't know. So when I first started listening to this, I was on my way to the airport with Caitlin, and she fell asleep because she said the guy's voice put her to sleep.
I get that sometimes.
Right. But this is not necessarily one of those like in a good way puts you to sleep, if you know what I'm saying.
Right. I do know what you're saying, because you're like listening to it, you're like looking out the window, and you're like, I haven't been listening for 20 straight minutes.
Right. It kind of is one of those, because it's super, like, I'm not saying his voice is bad and couldn't fit in, like if he was in like a dramatization as a character, on point, like would make a great character. But for this book, I was like, yeah, the same kind of drawl the whole time. I don't know, it wasn't that great.
Interesting. Okay, I want to talk for a moment a little bit more about Scott Brick. I feel like I wasn't completely thorough enough. He doesn't change voices, but he's really good with like his inflection and tone that he uses.
Sure.
I don't know how, because obviously there's a lot of robots that are talking in this, and I don't know, it's very clear, like even though he uses almost the same voice, it's like very clear who's talking.
Okay.
If that makes
good.
sense.
Sure. I think that's good. I mean, you know me, like we've been playing D&D for a while now, and I don't necessarily change voices, but I feel like inflection is that's enough almost to change characters, in my opinion. So
I 100% agree.
But yeah. So why don't you give me a little brief idea of what your book is about?
So iRobot is, if you've seen the movie, you have no idea what this book's about.
Oh, okay.
Which, like I said earlier, I came in kind of expecting something different. I mean, they're related a little bit, but not really. So this book is about kind of like, even though it's strange, most of it's set like in now times. They like, I think, expected the future to be set like a little more advanced than we were.
Okay.
And like each short story is like a different incident with robots, and they're not necessarily good or bad. It's just like different time periods of like the modernization of the robots and like how far they've come, and just like the difficulties the humans have had with them like throughout the whole process, because most of it you're getting from the perspective of people who are doing like the tests on them in the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
like the product development people, and there are a couple that are from the perspective of people actually using the robots like in main production doing things. But a lot of it is from because most of it is centered around like these three people that were there from the beginning as they were making the robots, as like towards the end when they're like on their way out of the business because they've been working there so long. Did I miss anything else? And most of it is first person, like you're getting one person, like what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they're doing.
Okay. How many stories is there within that? Like, how many short stories do you think?
There's 10.
Oh, okay. So about not quite an hour a piece or so. Okay, cool.
But when I listened to it, I was like, man, this feels like a bunch of short stories, but they're all loosely connected enough that it feels like a cohesive through line. Does that make sense?
Is it like a bunch of short stories that are happening at the same time, kind of?
No, it's like one event happens, and then like 10 years later, some of the people that were in that event are involved in a different event.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But sometimes those characters are like background characters, or like they're only characters you hear them talking about.
Interesting. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I'm trying not to give too much away yet.
Oh, sure. No, that gives me a good idea of like what your book is about. So.
And you can, if you're interested in iRobot, it is $19.93 on Audible, or you could, it is included with your Premium Plus. So if you are an Audible member, you can actually just get this one for free anyway.
Sure. I think mine is the same. I think that's why I grabbed it, because it was the same. Yeah. And you could buy the Old Gods Waken for $21, or
Oof.
like you said, it's included. Yeah. Spoiler alert: don't pay $21 for it.
Okay, I've been talking about mine. What the Old Gods Waken? What's that about?
So the Old Gods Waken. So this makes a little more sense now that it says it's called it's part of the Silver John series, because it's sort of loosely centered around this guy named John. But this is kind of about these people. This guy, his land out in the middle of kind of nowhere butts up against this other land out in the middle of nowhere. Okay, they both have like a ton of land, and in between their two places is like mountains and trees. And at one point, the the land next to his, the people who owned it, like they died, and they left it to these two brothers. And one day he goes up on his side of the property and he finds those two brothers are like fencing off a chunk, like an acre on his side. So he's like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, this is our land. And he's like, no, it's not. And he goes back to his house. He's like, I'm coming back with my son and we're going to tell you what's up. Well, he goes back to his house, and so he's going to get his son, and this John dude is there because his son's like, hey, Dad, I've got this John guy with me. It's super weird. So the whole point of the book, though, is that kind of you find out those two brothers are druids, and that the land between the two plots of land is like sacred land, and that's why they were trying to take it. And the whole book is this John guy trying to stop them from taking it, basically.
Okay.
I'll get into it. I'll get into it more after we pass the spoiler wall because I don't want to like give away the entire story yet.
So, like what time? Like what time is this set in? I guess is this like present day or?
So I thought at first the way they talk, I did kind of like this. The way they talk is very like Southern, like old school, like Southern back in like the 1800s, most likely. But then the one guy says something about, oh yeah, I'll go grab one out of the deep freeze. I'm like, wait, they have a deep freezer? Okay, so it's not as old as I thought it was. And then something about, oh yeah, I'll call up my friend so and so from the college. And she'll take the bus up here. I'm like, okay, so I honestly don't know when it actually like takes place in time.
Interesting.
So because he wrote it back in the late 70s, that might be when it sort of took place. It was around that same time.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to say about it other than that right now at this time, just because I don't want to, spoil too much yet.
So I feel like you've given your recommendation on yours.
Yeah, I hang on. You talk for a second. My kids are banging on the door.
Okay, if I had to guess, I'm gonna say Ryan didn't like this one. I'm just gonna throw that out there. I'm gonna put money on I'm right though. I'm gonna bet he didn't like his. That's how things have been going lately. He just doesn't usually. He seems to pick the bad ones all the time. I don't know why.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely correct. And no, I did not like this book.
I kind of thought so.
Yeah.
So with that though, I really liked iRobot. It was not what I was expecting, but I enjoyed it. And I feel like a dummy because I didn't realize this is like an old classic.
I didn't know that either. And when I picked it, because I put it in the library, and I just assumed it was the book version of the movie. Like
me too. I was expecting me to hang out with Will Smith, be a cop, wink at robots.
Sure.
But I'm actually happy that it wasn't that, because it's actually like an interesting like delving into like the human mind and human nature and like words and like their meaning and like how meaning can be interpreted in so many different ways. Like, I don't know. I really enjoyed it.
Interesting. That's good to know. And that is probably one that I will go ahead and listen to after after the podcast. So I'm just going to tell you right now, though, don't waste your time on the Old Gods Waken.
I think we've done 3 crossing swords, and you have not recommended any, and I've recommended all 3.
Great. Oh no, I'm gonna have to get better at this.
Dude, you're the angry one.
I'm not even angry. I know. I'm just like, man, Okay, once we pass the spoiler wall,
I feel like you got to get something out. Well, so we're gonna pass the spoiler wall.
do.
If you want to listen to iRobot, go do that now. It's not about Will Smith. Don't expect that. Expect to learn a little bit. I think if you want to listen to that. If you want to listen to
That's great.
Old Gods Waken, why?
Yeah,
I
don't.
guess.
I'm gonna tell you right now, don't bother. I could probably sum up most of the story in the spoilers and probably still keep this podcast under an hour. So
Okay, well, you go ahead. You tear into it.
I only want to tear into it because I want to say the first like 2 hours of this book, I was super into it. I was like, dang, this sounds cool. Cause I was expecting some like Cthulhu type stuff, you know? And that's what it started out as. Like it started out making you think that's what it's about. And then it just gets so boring. Oh, so disappointing.
It's funny because I mentioned to you, I was like, I'll do iRobot. You're like, I'm gonna do the Old Gods Waken. I was like, what? That sounds way cooler.
Yeah, I know. It's not nearly as cool as it sounds. I will tell you that. Um, it does have a couple concepts in it that I might steal for our D&D game because I think they're so cool.
Okay.
Okay, so I can pretty much talk about the whole book here really quick. So, like I said, this guy owns this land, and these the Voth brothers, they get the land like on top of the mountain next to his. It turns out to be sacred ground, right? So after he tells them, you better take that fence down because me and my son are gonna come up here and we're gonna whip your guys' ass. And then he gets this John guy, which I'm not kidding. His son is like at the house, and the guy gets back, and he's like, "Hey, Dad, this is John. I met him in town, and I told him he could come stay here for a while." And his dad's like, "That sounds great. Good to have you here, John." And I was
Wait,
like,
really? There's no more questions than that?
"No, none, zero. That's it." I'm like, I guess that's one way to introduce a character that you're gonna keep around, because John is actually like the main character, which is weird. So they go up there and they try to figure out like what the Voth brothers want, and the Voth brothers are gone, and they pulled their fence up. So they're like, oh well, they got scared of us. But this John guy, he's like this at the top of the mountain. Apparently, there's like a rock formation, and they wait till like this part to tell you this, that like on their walk up this trail, there's all these like stones carved as like monkeys' faces all the way up there. And they get to the top of the mountain, and there's like a mound like built in the shape of like a human like figure looking thing, like crouched down and sitting. It's built out of stone. And I was like, that's a pretty important piece of information that you're failing to mention until John sees it. Like, but like the guy who owns the property is like, there's just a bunch of rocks have been there forever. Like, it's so weird.
Like he couldn't see it?
I don't know if he couldn't see it or just like that. It had been in his family for so long that they just like didn't care. It's
okay.
I don't know. That part was kind of disappointing. But so then they find that the brothers had left something. It looks kind of like a pocket watch behind, and it has an upside down cross in a circle in it, which is supposedly like a way that they used to. It was like before Christianity, they would have the cross within a circle. So John calls this gal from a college, and she comes out and she looks at it because she knows all kinds of stuff apparently about history and all this stuff. So she looks at it and she's like, no, this is something way older than Christianity. And this is where I was like, my interest was piqued. I was like, oh, okay.
Oh yeah, but you were like, whoo, get into it.
Yeah. I was like, all right, we're talking about something cool finally. Like, yeah, older than Christianity. And she's like, they also used to use this, they'd put the circle over the cross sometimes to like deface Christian like symbols, basically. So like if they came across a cross, they would put a circle over it, like spray paint a circle or whatever, paint a circle over it to deface it. And that was like so sacrilege, basically. So she is like, this thing they left you though, they take it back, like because they took it back to the house, they kept thinking that like they felt like something was watching them or following them. So when she gets there, she buries it. And the next day they come out, and where she buried it, it looked like something had tried to dig it up. Like they put it under a stone, and something tried to dig the little symbol up. And I was like, oh damn, because it looked like there was a handprint next to it, like it looked like a human hand, but it had claw marks. I was like, oh shit, this sounds cool. So then she's like, they clearly did this to curse you. Like that's why they gave you this thing. And so that's when John's like, well, we can't let that happen. So for some reason, they go to town and they get this old Indian guy that they knew, this old Native American guy. And he's like, yeah, I'll go with you to stop these two brothers. And I was like, what? Okay, all right. And this Native American guy talks about a bunch of cool shit because he's talking about how, like, way back in the day, he said, like, think about this. There's obviously been a lot of things before Christianity, right? Religions. But he said, think about how many times somebody believed in something and then some other group came along and just like smashed all their freaking idols and their churches and whatever, and they leveled it, right? And they're like, nobody can believe in this anymore. Now you believe in these gods. So that's where like the title of the book comes from, is he said these old gods that used to be prayed to are now like waiting in the winds for someone to start praying to them again so that they can give them favor. And I was like, all right, you got me. Like, that sounds sweet. Well, the freaking Voth brothers come down. Boys? Yeah, the Voth boys, Brummett and Hooper.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah, that's
Are
their
you
name.
being serious?
Yeah, Brummett and Hooper. Yes, that's
Brummett
and Hooper
not
Voth.
A name.
Yes, these two brothers, they come down and they freaking kidnap Holly. That's the girl's name. They kidnap her, and this part I don't understand, and this is where the book starts to get really stupid. They kidnap her, and as like the two guys, like they hear her like scream because she's staying in like this little guest house that's like part of their barn or something, and they knock the older dude out. They kidnap her, and he says something about like before he passed out, they said 7 things or something like that before they left. And so the Native American guy's like, that means we have to go through 7 trials before we can face them. I was like, that's amazing that you know that based on that little information.
Wait, what?
And, oh, trust me, it gets worse. So this Native American guy and John proceed to go up the mountain to the Voth brothers' place to go get Holly back. And they have to face 7 trials. One of them is like this giant boar tries to kill them, and the Native American dude kills it. Another one is like they come across like these bushes that are just like on fire, and they have to like pole vault through them. They literally
what?
They literally go through like, you know, remember that Atari game Pitfall?
Yeah.
Like they literally, that's what I pictured in my head the whole time. Is
there's like crocodiles and like
yeah, they're
ropes.
Like, oh yeah, I'm not kidding.
and there's like a ladder that goes down and there's more crocodiles down there.
Yes, but it's seriously, that's like the whole second half of the book is them going through these 7 things. And then when they finally find the Voth brothers, the Native American guy, he's like super smart and he's super cool, but then when they question him, they're like kind of douchebags and like racist towards him. So he just plays into it. So John hides and they find the Native American guy and they're like, oh, look, because they're from England. They're like, look, it's one of the like redskin natives or something like that. And he plays right into it. He's like, yes, me native, me Indian. So like they think he's dumber than shit, but really he's like just playing along with them so they will trust him. And he basically they're gonna like do this trial, they're gonna sacrifice this Holly chick, they're gonna do this freaking thing, they're gonna awaken this old god. And I was like, yeah, cool, you know, you're gonna bring Cthulhu up from the ground. Yeah, no. Basically, the Native American guy makes them botch their trial, and they both get like struck by lightning because
Okay.
and knock themselves out. Um, and turns out there was like the spirit of some old guy who lived on that land like 100 years ago, and he was the one who was following them and tried to dig up the amulet. So they were like, these druids were like working with that guy, that spirit.
Is that what the
And
next book's about?
I don't know, because it doesn't say there's any other books in the series on Audible. I have no idea what the series is
Wait,
about.
really?
Yeah, this is the only one in the series on Audible, and that's the
Maybe,
end of
maybe
the
they were
book.
like, does there need to be another one?
I don't know. There probably is another one at some point, because like I said, it was written back in the freaking early late 70s, so there probably is a series. But yeah, maybe Audible was like, don't let them make another one. Just no good. Because that's it. And like it I don't know. Honestly, them going through the trials, which was supposed to be like super intense, was the most boring thing I've ever listened to.
Really?
Yes. I don't know how they made it so boring, but I was just so unenthralled by like what was happening that I liked the stuff about that. Like I said, the Native American guy talking about how like there are older powers than the ones that are obviously worshipped today. I was like, that's cool. Like that's a cool concept. It makes sense, you know. They go through with the crusade and they're like, you're worshiping Jesus now. End of discussion. And they're like, we don't want to worship Jesus. Too bad. And I was like, that's kind of cool though. They like stomped out. And mostly is talking about like because the druids believe in more like pagan beliefs, you know, and stuff of the world.
Mhm.
And that stuff was largely stomped out. So I was like, that's a cool concept. And the book just made it so stupid at the end. And that's the Old Gods Waken. Spoiler alert, no gods actually waken from it.
Well, maybe they're just like working on getting up. They hit the snooze button.
I guess, but it made for a super freaking boring book. That's all I can tell you.
Okay, well, so don't listen to that one.
No, don't bother. I'm telling you, do not waste your time. Although the Native American character in it is funny. Like
Okay.
he is a good character, and it's mostly funny because him and John are like buddies from back in the day, and when they first start talking, because Holly is with them, the Native American guy acts like super stereotypical like Native American, and until she like says something and he's like, I'm just kidding, I don't really talk like that. Like, he's like,
Interesting.
most people think that's how we all talk, you know, he just assumes that's how we talk, but he's like, obviously that's not how I talk. But yeah, when he starts fooling the freaking Englishmen, the way he's like making them think he's dumb it's pretty funny. But yeah, that's enough about my book. I probably talked way longer than I needed to about it, but that is all I have to say about the Old Gods Waken. Don't listen to it. Don't bother.
I don't think I'm gonna go as in depth as you did, just because it's kind of hard because mine is a bunch of short stories.
That's fine. I was mostly just trying to hit the bullet points so that it would make sense from beginning to end. And I literally told you the whole story from beginning to end.
That
So
is fair. So iRobot. I'll mention the first story because I feel like it's kind of important. So it opens with this little girl. Her name is Gloria, and she is like obsessed with her family robot. And this is like the first generation of robots, so it can't really speak. He has to talk through like hand gestures, but she like absolutely loves him. What were you gonna say, Ryan?
Okay. Oh, I was just gonna say, so this is not like a Jetsons robot.
No. Like imagine like an Iron Giant thing, but human size.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but she loves playing with her robot, and then her mom gets like, she's like, that thing's dangerous, it's gonna end up hurting her, so they end up sending it to, they like give it to a factory because it's just like a working robot. And so they send it to a factory, and her father, who has his daughter with him for some reason on that day, is inspecting that factory, and she sees Robbie, that's her robot, and she comes running towards him. And while she's doing that, this factory is like automated on its own, and it's like a forklift is coming and it's going to smash her. And nobody reacts in time except for Robbie, who saves her on his own. And he like didn't have to do that. And so from there, I kind of want to talk a little bit about, because this book is really about like the laws of robotics and how the laws interact with like human intentionality and like human emotions. So like
we don't end up with like the Matrix.
Kind of. It has a lot to do with like, because robots are not allowed there. So I'll just read the first law. A robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. So like the way that the robots interpret this is like, if they can do anything to stop a human from being hurt, they will. And so like what one of the stories is about this robot who can read minds, and he's lying to the scientists to not hurt their feelings. Like he lies to one of these scientists. He's like, oh, I'm not very good at math, because the guy's like a math whiz and he doesn't want to hurt his feelings that he's better at math than him.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And and they basically cause him to short circuit, because they're like, he has to tell the truth, but telling the truth would harm humans, so he can't do that. And it just like ends up like short circuiting himself out. And there's one of the other stories that's really interesting. It's about this robot called Speedy, his name is. And they talk a lot about like robots, if they have idle time, is time to think, like, which is kind of how they control humans still. But like if they have time to think, they like funny stuff starts going on. And so like on the space station, they had like 17 hours where the robots didn't have to do anything. And they go into the command center because they're like in a remote system, like reflecting light away from Earth. So it's not like, so if there's like harmful rays, they can like redirect them, and they have to like constantly be adjusting it. But like the robots won't let them in. They're like, no, you can't come in here. Like, we only believe in the creator, is what they call him. And he even says to them, he's like, you told me no being can create something greater than itself. Then how do you explain me? And he like lists off all the things that he can do that they can't. And he's like, it doesn't make any sense that you made me, because I'm better than you in every way. And this robot's name is Speedy, by the way, which is hilarious. He's an SP33 bot, but they call him Speedy.
Oh, that's great.
And so they like, they argue with him, and he's like, do not come in the control room. I will send for a shuttle for you, but this station can manage its own, but we don't take orders from anybody anymore. And they go back into the bay, and they're like, fuck, like, what are we going to do? We're in the middle of space. Like, we have to go into cryo sleep to go home. Like, it's going to take years before anybody even gets here. What are we going to do? And they notice a huge solar storm is coming, and they're like, oh man, if we don't adjust that satellite, like, this is so bad. But Speedy doesn't let them into the control room, and they just kind of let it happen. And then Speedy comes and talks to them, and they're like, wow, you manage the controls. And he's like, wow, you guys can't even take like nice gestures. Like, seriously? Like, he's offended, and I love that.
That's great.
Yeah, there's a lot about, like, this book has a lot to do with like the laws, and just like how harm is such of like a varied term, that like, because it can mean so many things. That doesn't necessarily mean a person dying. That can be like a person being slightly late for something or something like that. Like, there are so many things that can fall under harm, and it's just interesting to see like the robots' reactions to that. I guess there is another story that's not necessarily about the laws. It's about like the robots' restrictions, because they have like hive units. So they have one robot that's in command of like 6 other robots at the same time, and they all report to him. But they're testing this new frequency that nobody can tap into but the robots. Every time the robots are observed, they work, but when they're not observed, they don't work, and they can't figure out why. And so what they do is to try and like trick them, because what they think is happening is that anytime there's an emergency, he's like short circuiting, and he's treating his humans not being around as an emergency. And so they cause a cave in on themselves, and they almost get stuck down there. because they don't have no way to communicate with the robots. And what they end up doing is like shooting one of the robots because the one of the scientists figures out the reason that he's short circuiting is there's too many frequencies on the one robot. Like he can't handle 6 people at once.
Oh.
So he shoots one and like they figure it out, and that's how they're able to get out of there, which is kind of cool. There's a lot of like logic stuff that happens in this that I found it really entertaining. And the fact that it's so old is insane to me.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest shock to me is when I seen, like, obviously I knew the name of it. I didn't know any of the concepts of it, but even anything with the name robot in it that's from like the 40s, I was like, whoa, weird. Like that's crazy.
I don't really see how they got iRobot the movie from this. Like there was nothing like, oh man, the robot killed a guy, but they're not supposed to kill. Like that, there was nothing like that in this.
Isn't the movie based on these, because isn't this book have those same like 3 laws?
Yeah.
That's basically all I think they based the movie on, is those 3 laws. Everything else they just kind of made up.
Will Smith does have a sick flying car though.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the movie was good, and I thought that this was based on that movie or where the movie came from, and so I was like,
expecting.
Yeah, so I was like, that's got to be interesting. But I'm glad to hear that it's not like that's not what it is, and yet it's still very interesting. So I will definitely check it out.
I think you would get a kick out of this for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check this one out for sure.
Yeah, one thing I want to mention too is that they have robo psychologists.
Okay.
Because you have to like deal with the robots in certain ways, and the way that you speak to them has to be very precise. Like if you mess up one word, you can fuck them up. Like one of the things is like this. There's a military training exercise, and one of the guys tells the robots to go fuck itself, and it causes it to like fucking shut down in its head, because it's like, oh well, I'm supposed to help them, but what they told me to do was to go away, but my job is to be there. What they want is for me to be gone, but I have to be there. Like it caused its fucking brain to fuck up just because it was something simple like that. Yeah, because you have to be super precise with what you say.
Interesting. Huh. Yeah, that's an interesting concept. And I like what you said, that it seems to play a lot off of language like that.
Mhm.
Like I mean, because Caitlin and I have talked about that before, that like, especially the English language, we say some weird stuff that makes no sense. And I could definitely see that from like something that thinks very binary in like yes and no, on and off type of things. If they heard the way we talk about some stuff, yeah, I could see a robot being like, I don't get it at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I would definitely check it out. I barely even scratched the surface of what's there. It's kind of a long book, but it's not that long. What am I talking about, guys? Listen to Game of Thrones multiple times.
I'd say 8 hours, 8.5 hours is a very like comfortable length book, I guess.
Yeah.
I put that in that like 8 to 10 hour range, I think is a good length for a book. So that you can finish it in enough time and not be like, oh my God, when is this going to be over? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there are some long books I really enjoy though.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I've listened to all the Game of Thrones. Those are some of the longest that I've listened to. I mean, but I would say those are not for everyone either. So
no.
But I think that 8 hour range, like, I don't think, like, you have to come up with a lot of excuses to not finish an 8 hour book. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, especially for me, because I'm such a fiend. If I have 2 seconds, I'm gonna put my headphones in.
I do that too, and I do it all the time. So like, I'll put it on in my truck at work, like while I'm just sitting and I don't have anything to do. I'll be listening to a book, and then I have to like pause it, talk to somebody, and then unpause it for like 3 minutes, and then pause it again and talk to somebody. Yeah, so I spend a lot of time doing that as well.
Yeah, but it works. You get them done.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, positive reception on iRobot, not a positive reception on the Old Gods Waken.
No, not a positive one at all for me. I was very disappointed.
Yeah. Do we know what we're doing next time?
Actually, no, absolutely not. We haven't picked at all. We've both been very busy. We were barely even able to get this episode out, to be honest.
Well, so stay tuned for Anime Squires.
Yes, I'm gonna try and definitely make sure we can get that done this week for sure. That's gonna be resting on me because
The next
I have
book
no
is
one.
a question mark.
I think so. I don't have
I
anything
mean,
off
unless you
the
want
top
to
of my
pick
head.
one right now.
I mean, we could do that. No, I don't. That's too much pressure. I'm gonna crack under the
Oh,
pressure, and I'll
dude,
pick something stupid. So,
What about the Two Towers?
you think we want to do
We
that?
did just miss sequels month, but
We did just finish sequels month.
I mean, I want to do it. You know why?
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's a good point. All right. Yeah. So, The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien will be our next book. So look forward to that.
Yeah, better start listening right this second.
Yeah. No kidding. Yeah. Yeah. Don't say we didn't give you enough warning.
Yeah. So stay tuned for that one, and thank you all for listening. We really appreciate you guys. Anything else you want to say, Ryan?
No, that's it. Just like you said, thank you everyone for listening. We really appreciate it. And we hope to catch you guys in the next one.